another edition of the BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast. Andrew Calissa, Mike Gross along for this episode. Frank Bodani not with us, keeping Frank in our thoughts this week, but we do have Lavar Arrington, and I'm not quite sure how to introduce him anymore. NFL great, former Penn State great, Stix City, media mogul, has so many hats right now. I'm not quite sure, but Lavar Arrington of Linebacker U, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, Lavar, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about Jim Knowles, especially given that he's coaching your son now. What have you observed about him that's a little bit different and maybe unique? And what are you hearing from your son? I mean, if anything.
Well, he comes across as a tad bit mysterious, he has, which I really like about him, because Coach Koldenicki is like the total antithesis, right? He's like super outgoing, super energetic. I look at Coach Knowles and I immediately get like samurai master from him. Like, he's like he's almost like a Kale, like real, like kind of quiet, strong type, and it's more, it's just more mental. It's more mental for him, and so I had a brief interaction with him. He just seems like he's an old head that knows what he knows. He understands what he understands. That's what's important to him, and that was kind of the impression I got of him. In terms of the conversations I've had about him, seems like the guys really have taken to him very well. He's one of those types of guys. I think he allows for you to be able to build a relationship with him, but it seems as though he's maybe more of an observer. Yeah. And what I like about the fact of, kind of what, I hear about him is that he really, really takes the time, watches, and files away information as he's watching the guys go through practice. To me, this is a guy who he has success. If my estimation is right, my assumption is accurate. He's the type of guy that takes the information of what his players and what his personnel does and what they do best, and he utilizes those those skills or those superpowers that those guys possess. And that's kind of, it's kind of what I've taken away from in terms of maybe what's said to me about his coaching style, right. How he interacts with the players. But he definitely demands respect, and he certainly is one who has had great success. And I think these young guys are really learning what it's like to be around a guy that in Penn State, we've had elite defenses. So we've had elite defensive coordinators. They're used to it anyway. But I think Jim Knowles he's like that next level type of guy. And I'm really excited to see what he's able to do. And my son has had nothing but really glowing things to say about his experience so far being in his defense.
Lavar, in the media, we're making a big deal about this is a complicated defense. This is more unlike anything these guys have ever seen. You've been around complicated defenses your entire life. Do we in the media make more of that than we should? Because at the same time, these are great football players, familiar with certain systems. They're reading and reacting. So are we making too much of this going into Jim Knowles' first year?
It's funny because my reputation was being undisciplined and being a freelancer, and I didn't play within the defensive parameters. I don't know how the narrative started. I don't know how it was created. Did I make mistakes at times? Sure, I made mistakes. I think we all made our fair share of mistakes, but for me, it actually was very important for me to understand what was taking place within the defensive scheme. It was important to really be able to grasp what the defense is presented. And I say that to qualify my response to your question. I think it can be. I think learning a Jim Knowles defense and learning a defense that really, really plays to people's strengths, I think it can be complicated because you have to understand what the terminology of defense is, when that terminology applies. Does it take place once the ball is snapped? There are a lot of different components to making sure that you are successfully executing and running the defense that's called. So I I would offer the idea of maybe for some guys, it's not as difficult to learn the defense. I don't think it's overstated to say that a defense can be complicated or that Jim Knowles' defense could be complicated. I just think it comes down to understanding fundamental things about defenses, how to count receivers, how to, adjust to movement and motions and shifts, and knowing if you have man versus zone, and knowing what your help is if you're in zone, where you're supposed to be in zone. All those things are really categorized. If you can organize and categorize what defenses are presenting, then you should be pretty good with learning any type of defensive system, any type of scheme. I think it's just more or less situational football, understanding the various, again, the terminology of what it is, but the general positions that you line up in, the things that you do. You can only do so many blitzes. You can only do so many blitzes from so many different places, depending on what your position is. There's only so many run fields. There's only so many zone coverages. You got seam, you got hook, you got curl, you got flats, you got deep thirds, whatever it may be, deep quarters. There's only so many things that are there to be offered on the defense. So as long as you're able to organize what it is that you're being asked, and the different sets, the different formations, the groupings that you're in, I think that it shouldn't be too much for them to be able to learn it and play fast without thinking too much. At least that's my hope.
Lavar, we're really getting a little bit into the weeds here, X and O weeds, but something that James said on Saturday at Media Day, specific to linebacker play, that I wanted to ask you about. He said that under Manny Diaz, and I guess under Tom Allen too, the linebacker thing was more of a gap responsibility thing, and under Knowles, it's going to be more of a traditional read and react type thing. That's what he said. So just let people know a little bit, expand on that a little bit. What's that going to be? And is it anything that people are even going to notice if they're sitting in the stands watching the game?
Well, I think when you set units up to play read and react, it's much different than gap. Gapping it's almost like I can honestly say I saw some of Coach Allen's defense, and it was really kind of an adjustment of gap reading. So it depended on what the defensive lineman did, what the linebacker's gap responsibility was. So if it was a run to your side and the tackle, for instance, gets reached by the guard, then they become an automatic, A gap player, right? And so now the linebacker has to play off of that A gap and get over top to the B gap, if that makes any sense, since we're talking football talk. But and that was still kind of a read and react type of deal, because the way Tom Allen's defense was ran, you get upfield as quickly as you can and penetrate, and the linebackers are supposed to keep you right. As far as read and react, like just looking at how Ohio State played things last year, they did look like they moved faster than everyone, and they did look as though they were very intentional in the things that they were doing. I would just assume that was him building a confidence and a trust amongst his unit, having a couple strong leaders on that safety that they had on that team, the Styles brothers on that team. I just think that it takes having enough guys that understand it well enough where guys are aligned properly and have a pre-snap feel for what it may or may not be. If it's a heavy RPO team, you're going to make sure you're playing that run first. But now in today's football world, it's generally played pass first. So depending on the sets, if you have queens or trips or full flow set, whatever it may be, you're getting that pre-snap read, and your alignment is based off of that pre-snap read. Your adjustments are based off of if they're staying there or if they're shifting, and then that has to adjust with a shift or motion. And then it's really just plug and play, right? They're probably going to, on rundowns, they're probably going to read run first, and it's going to be a step. It's going to be a read run step, and whatever they read keys wise, read and react is go get the ball, see ball, go get ball, right? So that may be them running underneath a block. It may be them climbing and meeting them further down the field. They have to, football's very scientific. So they have to understand the angles, the speed, like you got to gauge speed. So if that guy is flying, you're probably best to climb and go down more downfield to try to meet them downfield versus trying to go behind the block and maybe meet them in the backfield or whatever it may be. So there's common sense, there's IQ, there's intellect. But the one thing that I like about Knowles and his defense is he puts them in position to take ownership over that, because really it now comes down to the players' preparation of what the team wants to do that they're playing against, and understanding it from a mental, intellectual standpoint going into the game. And then that allows you to just play off of instincts, play off of the instincts of what you saw on the film.
Lavar, when guys are able to maximize their potential, play off their instincts, and make plays, they leave a legacy. You are possibly number one in that category when it comes to linebacker. So I wanted to ask you about the number 11. You come to Penn State, number 31 was the linebacker number. Then
it still is.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about the elevation when maybe you had a call with Spider to give NaVorro Bowman number 11, because Spider was like the gatekeeper for forever at Penn State. So what does it mean to you to have your number elevated alongside number 31 as the numbers that are known on Penn State defense and legends?
I mean, that's pretty it's pretty flattering. It's definitely pretty flattering considering the guys that have worn 31. I mean, I played with a 31 with Mac Morrison. He's in the legacy of Shane Conlon and Paul Puz-Lesney, and all those. Puz wore it after Mac. You know what I mean? So 31 means a ton. I would just say for me, I was very intentional with my number. I chose my number. Tom Bradley talked to me about it and said to be the first U. And so becoming 11 was a conscious decision that was made. And the brand, the growing of the brand, it turned into a thing after Brandon Bell wore it. And the reason being is, and a lot of people don't talk about Kyrie, but Kyrie Fort wore 11 as well. It's just, that was one of those time periods where, he left, he went to Cal, but, he did wear the 11. He did wear the Stix and represented. I don't know why we don't really talk about him too much, but he is a part of it. But NaVorro was going through a few things, and me and NaVorro linked up one summer before football season and spent a ton of time together. And just, it was just pure fellowship, mentorship, camaraderie, and family. And I told him for a reboot and a reset from maybe some, memories that we wanted to distance ourselves from, things that may have took place that we might not have been necessarily overly proud about, but starting anew and creating a new narrative for your journey. I told him to wear 11. And the reason being is me and him had such a respect. Him and I, we had such a respect for one another. Him being from the DMV and being from PG County, and just watching him grow through the years. I mean, I paid attention to him, Derek Williams, Cameron Wake, any guys that came from the DMV area, because I played for the team there. But he was special. He became more special to me and my family, and he donned that 11, and it meant something because it was a personal connection between he and I, and the way he approached his business from that day forward. And I'd say it probably turned out pretty well for him. When Brandon Bell took it, it was almost like as to say, because I've always wanted to have a say and have a part to do with who wears 11, because I built the number, I made the number, and sometimes that gets lost in it. Is it was an intentional building of the number for linebackers. I was a part of, having these conversations, getting it going with NaVorro, and then Brandon gets it, and he's like, I just like the number, and I wanted to switch to 11. And I was like, somebody needs to talk to Brandon Bell about what 11 represents. If he's going to wear 11 and play linebacker at Penn State, I know he's coming out highly rated, and he's a fine football player and this, that, and the other, but you're not going to just throw 11 on because, I just like 11 and I'm going to wear 11. Like, know the history of 11. And I think that's when it became a thing. Like, that's when it became officially, like, I'm going to make sure people understand what wearing the Stix represents. Because I was nicknamed Stix. Like, I was called Stix when I was coming out. LA, Stix. Stix was one of my nicknames. Then it ended up being NaVorro's nickname. So they started calling NaVorro Stix. And then I started realizing, like, if you wore 11, the teammates were nicknaming them Stix, and there wasn't any connection to it. It wasn't like, they were calling Lavar that, or they called NaVorro that. Like, it was just happening, almost like some Shamu type action, and so that's when it became a city. And I really started branding and wanting people to understand that the elevation of what you represent wearing 11 at Penn State, it's very real. It's not myth. It's not legend. It's very real. And it plays out every single time somebody goes there and they're actually worthy of wearing the number. And that's why everybody who's worn it has been so special, because it's very intentional. Abdul's very intentional. Micah, very intentional. Brandon, not so much. Brandon made the choice, but that was kind of before it became a thing, to now, like there needs to be a little bit more of an understanding and a process connected to wearing 11. You don't just jump in 11. You just don't do it. And that's something that I enjoy being a part of, protecting that, that legacy of it.
I'm with you. I think all the numbers should be like that. I have certain numbers that I'm like, this number is only on a defensive back. This number is a D tackle. Certain numbers should only be at positions, and there has to be a connection to go with them. So I'm 100% with you on that.
And just so we're clear on that, because there were a lot of people like, he shouldn't, my son shouldn't have gotten 11, so soon, and he should have earned it, and different things like that. These are conversations that I've had as it really started with NaVorro having the conversation, and then that was worked out, through Spider and through Coach Paterno and the coaching staff. As far as with Brandon, I was asked about it. I was brought into it, but Kyrie Fort, we talked about it, and I gave the blessing to it. Brandon Bell was the only one that I did not have a direct connection and conversation in him wearing it. But after that, it was conversations with Micah Parsons before he, I don't want to create no issues, but, wearing 11 at Penn State might have sounded more attractive than where he was going originally, which if he would have went where he was going originally, some people, OHIO,
we know.
So the whole idea of it is don't play around somewhere else with what you could become a legendary figure for life if you come here and wear 11. And I had that opportunity because I worked so closely with Under Armour. So I would see the Under Armour All-Americans, and I would see them as future 50s. I ran an 8th grade All-Star game. So I've seen and known these kids since they were in 7th, 8th grade. So it just became a narrative to, motivate and inspire guys. And if you were actually really good enough to make it to Penn State, play linebacker, and we had a relationship, then yeah, like we would have a conversation about you wearing 11. I spoke to Abdul prior to him getting 11, and it was a conversation of respect. So I think it should always be that. I'm hoping one day it turns into a committee. Like all of us that have worn it should be able to sit and decide and have the conversation, whether it's somebody who's already there or somebody who's coming in. But when Micah came in, when Abdul came in, and now with Lavar, with Man coming in, those were all predetermined conversations. So it wasn't like they got it by accident or this is what was just assigned to them. It's very, very intentional. If you get 11, it's intentional.
Lavar, during the several years that the whole NIL thing has existed, you've been connected to that, and whether it's like individual brand building or it pretty quickly became like a recruiting tool for people to throw money at recruits, whatever. What's your connection to it now, and where do you feel like Penn State is in that space compared to everybody else?
Yeah, I think Pat Kraft wants to be the best athletic operation in all of college sports. And so whatever is needed to be done, Pat Kraft has been very, very methodical in his movement. He's been very, very bullish in how he approaches things, and it's given way to an opportunity for someone like me who I've mentored and I've taught brand building forever, like going back to NaVorro Bowman or Sean Merriman from Maryland. And so for me, this has always been a natural part of what I do. I talk to our players and I keep up with them on a consistent basis since forever. This is not new. This is something that I labeled Derek Williams, D Wills, and Jesus Shuttlesworth. That was his nickname, was, because he's one of the GOATs for the things that he did for our program. And so like I've been a part of having these conversations, building your brand. You can make a play that'll get you a lot of money, get you drafted high, make more plays, you become a Hall of Famer, stuff like that. But helping somebody and giving them an experience, that's priceless, right? So my whole thing has always been to try to impart that knowledge and that information into our football players. And now with Roar Plus, the opportunity for me to be able to work with our student athletes, all of them across all sports, and help them to understand what that experience, I call it knowing the deal, know your demographic of people, make sure you're entertaining them, and make sure you leave them with an experience, and make sure they know that you love them and you love what you do. That's how you really win. I now have the opportunity to be able to build and teach them about their brands where they can create content. And to me, I feel like that's the cutting edge. That's the innovative way of approaching, building a war chest for NIL, because one, you're giving, this student driven content. This is the idea of it is to build up the content from our students. We're giving our audience a view and a vantage from them that has really never been done before. And you get to see it and experience it. And that's you supporting and buying into the fact that, well, maybe this isn't a sponsored sport, so your contributions and your support to looking at their content is ultimately going to, my goal is I want to be able to pay all 800, what is it, 800 and I forget the number. It's like 35 or 25, something like it's 800 plus. I want to be able to create impactful content where our support from our community watching the content, we're able to pay every last one of them, like every last one of our athletes. That's my goal. That's, to me, that's my contribution to the grand experiment, and bringing my, what I believe my experience and expertise and understanding of media and how it works and how content works. That's what I've been working on very intensely, and I'm really focused in and dialed in on it becoming the wave. Like, I believe we will create a new trend, which is, we're not just begging for money, we're not just giving money away. It's impactful, right? You got to commit to creating content, and creating good content is even more of a task. So to me, being able to create these moments where you're legitimizing what it is that they're getting, and where that money will come from, I think that it's very impactful, because you're able to teach some really great life lessons and approaching it this way. So now you don't have to feel so dirty about asking for money or supporting this way. Yeah. It's like you're giving them a product by giving them you. And so that's kind of been the approach to what I'm doing as far as with our NIL and empowering our athletes to put themselves in position to be able to generate money for their brand while they're in college.
Lavar, you said grand experiment. That was Coach Paterno thing. He was all about fully funding scholarships across all the varsity sports at Penn State, making sure that field hockey, fencing, they got the money that needed for them to be successful. What would he say today to what you just said about a star football player coming in here, coming up with the plan and helping all of those student athletes? Because there are still some people out there that would say, oh, they're not for NIL, or this is bad for the way sports is going. I don't think, personally, the way you just said it, I think Coach Paterno would tell all those people this is the way it's supposed to happen.
I think he would be proud of it, because it's an adjustment and it's an adaptation. As whether we like it or not, whether we think it's good or bad, whether we think it's the devil or the next step to heaven, whatever, you think it's fair, you think it's unfair, no matter what side you fall on it, it's now the reality, right? That's just what it is. Like, that's not up for debate. You can have an opinion as to what side you fall on it, but what's factual is NIL is here and it's not going anywhere. So to me, I look at it from the standpoint of grand experiment. To me, is ultimately, no matter where you come from, no matter what you made, what your family made, no matter what your family unit is, no matter what it is, you're coming here and you're going to become a family here. And the experiences here transcend any of those things that I just mentioned. And so for me to be able to create, experiences and educate our athletes and our coaches, staffs, our administrators on our teams, to have the opportunity to empower them, teach them how this platform will work, teach them how they can really work to build the brands of not only themselves and their players, but of the program itself, by creating these experiences through content. I think he would be proud of it. And I think that he would look at what the current state of college athletics is. And while I don't know, if let's just say, for the sake of saying, he was at a place where he could continue coaching, I don't know that he would have continued to coach in this type of stage in NCAA ball, college football. But I would believe that he would want to see an evolution of how you can actually leverage being who you are and continue to grow and build the legacy of what Penn State has represented when he built the reputation, and when so many others that have come through Penn State have worked to continue to build what that all represents, what being a Penn Stater represents. So I think he would be, I think he'd give me a hard time, as only Joe would do, and could do. But I think that he would be super supportive in what it is that my approach, because it's rooted in education. You'll see we'll have we're going to have people from Schmill Business College involved with what it is that we're doing. I'm trying to involve as many people in the school as I possibly can to show that us coming together with our resources represents what the whole We Are moniker is. And that's us all coming together and making something work. No different than what we do with Don. We've done it before. We'll continue to do it in other aspects. And I'm just really like pumped up to try to be a catalyst to us doing it again.
Lavar, this could be the last thing for me. We really appreciate your time, man. But
Sure.
are you as high on this football team as everybody else is?
I'm always cautiously optimistic. That's how I'll play, because there's so many things. I always say there's so many things that have to go right for a team to win it all.
Yeah,
it's so many things that have to go right. And is this a team that can win it all? Absolutely, they can. Absolutely, they can. I mean, if we're being honest, as talented as Abdul, as a player, as talented as Warren is as a player, we lost Kevin. We didn't have KJ out there last year, but as talented as the guys that we've lost with Kobe and with Jalen and those guys, I still think the senior leadership that and the experience that you have on this team, I think we had, like, somebody asked me the question in the chat room today, how many draft picks do you think are on this team? I think it's like in between like 8 to 10, 8 to 11.
And that's in the 2026 draft. That's in the next draft, right?
Correct.
All in the next draft. Yeah.
This one that's coming.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
If we're just looking at it off of how many of those are potential first round, second round picks, there's probably a strong amount. Quite a few, maybe as many as it was when I was in school, maybe more. So if you ask me, I thought we were going to go play Florida State my last year in school, and factors went against us. I don't know why it didn't happen. It is what it is. But I thought that team, I mean, you had a number 1 and a number 2 overall draft pick on the same team, on the same side of the ball. I don't see how you're losing any games. You know what I mean? I don't see. We did what we were supposed to do as a defense. Did I slip right there? Did I slip? We did what we were supposed to do. Anyway, the point is, I believe with the transfer portal and the young kids that we have at the receiving position, which was my biggest question mark. My biggest question mark is obviously, how are we going to bounce back from receiver? I think that's everybody's question mark. Yeah. And we get a second year under Kodanicki. I think that Drew Aller is going to be as special as advertised. And I think it might be head and shoulders better than what he was before, because it could be debatable as to how prolific he was at times during the year, which I think he would take as a fair criticism. But I know he's a competitor. He's super smart. He's a big-time leadership guy, connects with all the guys. They're all older. And I just think the amount of leadership on both fronts, the defensive front, the offensive front, and Drew Aller's experience, Katron and Nick being in the backfield, adding those receivers, I think this is going to be a prolific offense. And bringing Jim Knowles in, people question if the linebackers are deep enough and this and that. They are. If you were wondering, they are. That's that third guy in the hole. You got, obviously, I believe it's going to be Rojas and it's going to be Agent Zero and Dom DeLuca that get out there and do what they're going to do. But I really believe that Specca Specca could end up starting. He could end up being first guy if I'm looking at it and seeing it the right way. I think they do have depth. And I think what's going to be cool about this year is we're going to get to see that depth early on in the year. And we're going to get to see if any of those young guys, maybe even little young Stix, we're going to see if those guys bring elements to the table that would actually require them to have any real serious consideration to break into a rotation by the time they get to Big Ten play. But it's such a senior and experience laden team. I look at the defensive front. They're going to be nice. I think Fish is going to have a breakout. Fisher's going to have a breakout year at the other defensive inside. I think Zane and Deny are going to be virtually unblockable guys. And if you block them, it's going to take two guys, three guys.
Yeah,
so they're taking up 4 guys every play. So I look for Jim Knowles to try to put them in positions where they can utilize making plays still, even though they're going to get all the attention. And ultimately, it's going to be read and react, see ball, get ball, because everybody's going to be blocking, denying, and blocking Zane every play. Yeah. It's only going to be a handful of guys that are there. Secondary is deep. Zaki is I like the secondary. King Mack is dope. I really like this group. So if you ask me, I go through all the different positions on the team. I don't see a team that is lacking. I don't see a position that is lacking, where, especially if you were to say lacking to the degree of what they're a liability. I don't see any position groups as a liability. So the answer would have to be it's a high expectation year for this team.
Lavar, we always end with a fun one. So we're going to go away from the football field. We're going to go pre the founding of Stix City. You're recruited by John Thompson at Georgetown, Gene Smith at North Carolina, and Joe Paterno. Did any of those?
John Calipari at UMass.
I thought I wasn't sure if Calipari was still at UMass.
Bobby Huggins at Cincinnati.
Nice.
So were Thompson, Smith, were they ever in the same room with Joe Paterno? Or were they ever in this conversation? And how do you turn down those guys to go play for Joe Paterno?
Because I stopped growing. I was 6'3".
Yeah, that'll do it.
You know, I was 6'3", and I played a big man's position. So
6'3" power forward.
At best, I would have been a small forward. At best. And so I wasn't ball handling like that. I was not a hooper. Like, I was really good. And if I would have continued to grow, maybe like at the height that I am and the way that I played with my quickness and with my work ethic, I could have been like a 6th, 7th man off of the bench, you know, for one of those programs. And there were times I entertained possibly going to a different school because they were going to allow me to play football and basketball and run track. I wanted to do all 3. So it turned out to be the right decision to make. I mean, that the program grew me into a man, and the lessons that I learned being there ultimately led to me having the life that I live now, which is an amazing, fulfilling life that I live. So it was the right decision. But yeah, I did get recruited by them schools, and it's pretty cool, pretty flattering to think that, you know, I was actually good enough to get, you know, actually a cool story was my last year, which was my junior year playing basketball, UMass was coming to town to play Pitt in a game. And John Calipari brought the team to practice at my high school so that he'd have an opportunity to talk to me, which was super, super cool. Like, my head coach in high school was John Calipari's head coach when he was in high school, Joe DiGregorio. And so I had the opportunity to play for a legendary coach. He coached Calvin Murphy as well. And so I had a legendary high school coach. Coach Calipari brought Marcus Camby, that group of guys in, that legendary group at UMass. They came in and practiced on our court, and it was pretty cool. It was very intense, understanding that the people that were recruiting me, the level of what that represented, and my level of competition. That was pretty cool. It was pretty cool to be in that situation. But I never really never really gave basketball like a really fair opportunity moving into college. I was pretty focused in on I wanted to be a linebacker and I wanted to play linebacker at the college level.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And Tom Bradley, I know, very happy because he always tells the story about walking in the first time to see you. Some young kid came running up and be like, you got to see Lavar. You got to see Lavar. Tom turns his head and you run the opening kickoff back the first time he ever came to see you.
He came to see Eric Kasparovich, which was one of the greatest high school football players I ever got to watch with my own two eyes. And he just happened to be my teammate. He was the quarterback. And that was the only time I ever won a championship. So go figure. Only ring I got. But I'll tell you what, the stories of what he gives me, and the kids say, yeah, he's pretty good. He's going to play on Sundays one day. And another kid told him, yeah, I think he could go play basketball too. Like, I think it's really cool when you can create memories. Like I said in the beginning of the conversation, it's all about creating experiences, right? There's a strong possibility that I had an opportunity to spend time with those kids that he met. Strong possibility that I threw a football with them, or I chased them and tackled them on the field while they were getting ready for practice or whatever it may have been. I just grew up in a super, super cool community. Can I be old school for a second? A bunch of Italians and a bunch of black people, right? And some we had a couple Polish people as well. It was just a crazy mix of different backgrounds, different groups of people that loved one thing, which was competing on Friday nights. And it built a such a firm foundation for everything that would come from that. But Tom Bradley was a major part of that. Like for basically, 3 years of my life, he was super important to me. And so I owe a lot to him. Like I was probably going to go to a different place. But he sold me on the fact that I was a big Ray Lewis, Derrick Brooks fan. So I was looking at Miami and Florida State. And I looked at Pitt and I looked at Penn State because Penn State is linebacker U. So I'm like, all right, it's linebacker U. I got to take a look at Penn State. But Florida State and Miami, something ended up happening with Miami. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to go there. And then they were going on probation. And then Florida State, I was just, I was thinking about how much my parents would be able to be a part of my career if I went out of state. I started thinking about even just extended family. And then I started thinking about, hell, I built a reputation in Pennsylvania. Why would I go play football in a different state? I didn't feel like it was smart to start over on trying to rebuild my brand or to build my brand. I really felt like staying in the market where everybody knew me, at least on the west side of the state, that it would have been a great opportunity. So I started really, really looking at Penn State, and the things that I learned from Coach Bradley during that time of him recruiting me was ultimately the determining factor on me wanting to go there. Anybody that spends this type of time listening to me, as y'all can see by this interview, I like to talk. I like to communicate. I don't like to leave the communication up to interpretation. I like for you to know. And so I was blown away by his patience because he would just let me talk. And once I get done talking, he'd give me some really, really impactful nuggets. And it was more impactful. Our conversations, we became friends. It wasn't about football. It was about, what are you doing to be better in life? Did you help anybody today? What are you getting into? Like, I was really big into Make-A-Wish and first responders. I've always been a first responders guy. So I've always been really endeared to when I grew up in Ross Township, our fire department. But I also was a big part of Make-A-Wish Foundation. So it was really challenging me. He was challenging me to become a better person. And honestly, I feel like that's where James Franklin and this coaching staff is as well. I believe that they are in the same business and they carry a lot of the same values. And that's why I was comfortable when, Madman said that that's where he wanted to ultimately go to school. It felt right to me for him to continue our legacy as Arringtons at Penn State.
There you go.
Thank you very much, Lavar.
All right,
great conversation, deep conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, Lavar Arrington, the great Lavar Arrington. Appreciate it, man.
We are, baby. Stix City.
It's a place. All right, guys.
Thanks, man.
Cool.
Take care. All right.
Enjoyed it. Man, he brings it. He fills it up.
Yeah, he's super busy, so we're very grateful that he could take time out of his busy schedule to give us 45 great minutes here on the Blue White Tailgate podcast. I remember the last time I saw him, he's talking about first responders, American Legion in Harrisburg.
Right. Yeah, he's done a lot of that kind of stuff. I think he has kind of an idealized notion of what NIL is. And unfortunately, I think it's evolved or devolved maybe past that to throwing money at kids as a recruiting tool. But he's he has been doing that kind of stuff for pre-NIL, before it existed.
Yep. And then just talking about that, he mentored a high school football team down here in South Central Pennsylvania,
right,
in Lebanon County. He took Elko, and Elko was having a great year. And I remember I was covering Elko at the same time, Coach Miller over there, their quarterback, Braden Bohannon, and it was just a ride that they were on. Best season that Elko ever had.
Yeah.
And Lavar is doing weekly phone calls with them every single Tuesday and Wednesday. I mean,
how about that?
That's the type of person it is. So when we talk about NIL and what NIL has become like throughout the nation, which for a little bit devolved into legalized bag drops, which the teams that adjusted the quickest to it kind of already had the structure in place, blue chips, Nick Nolte type of stuff. But to see how Lavar wants it and spread it all the way out, I think is not only a tribute to Coach Paterno, it's a respect for Coach Paterno. And when people talk about carrying on a legacy, just because you're not here doesn't mean that legacy isn't carried on, because it is carried on through other people that you influence. And Lavar Arrington is a shining example of that for Coach Paterno in this era of college football.
Yeah, that's absolutely genuine. He is very, very sincere about that. And again, it's not something that has recently occurred to him. It's a thing that he's been all about for a long time.
Well, Mike, we had plans to talk about Penn State Media Day. I think we would trade in press conferences for 45 great minutes with Lavar Arrington. So we are going to wrap up a little earlier than normal here on the Blue White Tailgate podcast. Make sure you email in the show. If you're listening to this, you got to pass this on to your friends. There's no podcasts out there that are outside of Penn State's orbit that are bringing in former Penn State players, impact players, to talk about their experiences at Penn State, that also talk about their expectations and their interactions with this team. The Zach Mills, the Kyle Brady's, the Lavar Arringtons, and also former coaches. Joe Moorhead was on this program as well right before the Big Ten championship. Those are many great podcast guests. So tell your friends, spread the word. The Blue White Tailgate Podcast Network is growing. Reach on out to us at BlueWhiteTailgatePodcast@gmail.com. For Mike Gross, I'm Andrew Klista and the great Lavar Arrington. We'll see you next week. And for Frank Bodani, he will be back on the next edition of Blue White Tailgate Podcast. The roar takes us away.